Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this second to last screencast for Plan 30852 and 60852 Green Infrastructure and Sustainable City. Today I'm going to introduce this week's lectures of Week 11 for Water and Sustainable Cities. And the thing to remember here is that within the green infrastructure literature, water is a significant and very prominent area of discussion, of research, of terminology and of practice. So it's a very, very integral part of the global debates around green infrastructure. And what we'll talk about on Thursday is the way in which this terminology, be it for stormwater or combined sewer overflows, is being used in the United States and how that differs from the way in which we talk about green infrastructure and water in the United Kingdom or even in Europe. And one thing to be very clear about here is that although there are people who would differentiate between green infrastructure and blue infrastructure, or GI and water management, there is an overarching understanding that the blue of the landscape and the environment, so water, rivers, lakes, even coastlines, are part of this wider discussion of green infrastructure. And that is something that we'll talk about quite extensively in terms of how do we appreciate and understand these variations in terminology when we're all trying to do the same thing. So one of the things that we'll be looking at is about how water is managed in different cities around the world, what sort of investments in green infrastructure we can expect to see, and how these things may differ between locations. And one example we'll talk about is Brasilia. In Brazil, a planned city that has extensive areas of green space within it, be it through the monumental or be it through city parks or national parks, but which, when it comes to heavy rainfall, floods quite frequently. Now, the city was designed and built and finished completed 59 years ago, and because of this, there is a lack of sustainable urban drainage being reported in the city. So how we plan our buildings, how we plan our leisure facilities, how we invest in the natural environment changes depending on where we are, when our city was built, how old or new it is, and what we can possibly do to try and mitigate some of these ideas. And so what we'll talk about is how cities with extreme rainfall are actually prospering or not due to their ability to manage water resources. And we'll use examples from the UK, from the United States, from the growing understanding of sponges in China, to talk about how we might manage the environment and the water resources in urban areas. Within this, we'll also talk about who's involved in this. Is it city government? Is it developers? Is it specific water bodies or water authorities, such as United Utilities in the UK or metropolitan water districts in the United States? So one thing that we will think about is both the complexity and the complementarity between economic, social and ecological values of green infrastructure and water, and the ways in which different projects lead to different interpretations. So we'll talk about the Sabarmati Riverfront again, which we spoke about before, and we'll look at how the management of this waterway has been deemed as both a positive in terms of flood management and flood mitigation, but also a socio-economic or a socio-cultural negative in terms of restricting access to the waterfront, changing livelihoods and living patterns, and actually mitigating or changing the way in which water is managed throughout the city. So one thing that will become apparent from this lecture is the fact that water can be managed at a very sort of micro scale, so a very sort of unique project and individual scale, but also that we need to think more strategically about how a city or a region actually reviews and manages its water resources if it's going to be sustainable in the long-term future. So that's a rough overview of what we'll be doing on Thursday. See you all then, and have a good rest of the week.